Welcome to All About Art. My name is Alexandra, and I'm an art historian, curator, and writer. Within this podcast, topics relating to art history, cultural policy, the art sector, as well as a large range of other art-related topics will be covered. Conducting critical discussions, having entertaining exchanges, or just enjoying some relaxing chats, All About Art is where you'll find it all. Join me in exploring and developing cultural discourse. Welcome to another episode of All About Art. In this episode, I sat down with Elisa Nuyten, founder of the Vega Foundation, a Toronto-based organization dedicated to artists' film and video. I speak to Elisa about what her foundation does, supporting a medium that many of us love, but that often exists in the margins of the art world. We talk about her journey from collector to foundation founder, including the practical realities of launching a foundation, the building blocks, the governance structures, the tax lawyer, and why she chose Toronto and Canada as a home base for the foundation. I ask her about specific works from her collection that have shaped how she approaches the arts today, which was really exciting to talk to her about. And I also ask her why she felt compelled to focus specifically on moving image practices despite, or perhaps because of, the challenges this medium presents for collecting and display. We talk about how the Vega Foundation has evolved over its first 3 years, the psychology of supporting experimental work, the unseen infrastructure that makes artists' film and video possible, and so much more. Thank you, Elisa, for coming on the podcast. Before we dive into the episode, I want to take a minute of your time to mention that All About Art is on Patreon. We are mostly volunteer-led, but in order to cover running costs and other expenses, we make it possible for our lovely listeners to support us, ranging from £1 a month to the price of an oat latte a month, or on the higher end, the price of a Sunday brunch per month, depending on the tier you want to choose. If every person who listens to the podcast signed up for the £1 tier on our Patreon, we would be able to sustain the podcast while also having scope to produce episodes more frequently and expand our activities in demystifying the professional arts sector. So, if you want to receive early access to episodes and behind-the-scenes content, maybe you want to get some merch, or if you just love what we do and want to support us, I would be thrilled if you considered signing up. The link to the Patreon is in the show notes. And now, on to the interview. Also, thank you to our sponsors at Synergy Associates, the art world tech gurus, for supporting this episode's production at their clubhouse on Pall Mall. You can find more about Synergy and their facilities in the show notes. All right. Welcome to the podcast, Elisa.
Thank you, Alexandra, for having me.
So can you start us off by telling me about your background and what got you interested in the arts?
My life path is not exactly a straight path. I have been much influenced by intuition more than rationality. And I realized that's also something from the start, that my free spirit and my sense for adventure and curiosity have guided me. I grew up in Belgium, in the countryside, in a very lovely setting where we played outside in the fields and the trees all the time.
Yeah,
But by the time I was teenager, I was like, I couldn't wait to get away from that. And when I moved to university, I was so happy. I was on my own and I was in a city. And then I went to Leuven and Brussels for communication sciences and public relations. And what I did all through my high school and university a lot too was I worked in a fashion store on weekends, on Saturdays. I feel this is instrumental in how my life panned out to know that. And the other thing I did during my university was I ended up working as a tourist guide in the summers on the Canary Islands. And that's sort of how I came to Canada. Like, I had a distant relative. I came to Canada not knowing anybody, but I came there because I had finished my studies and I wanted more adventure and travel. And I didn't want to sign up for a serious life yet in Belgium. So I took up this opportunity to come to Canada for an exchange, a 1-year exchange. And in that year, I fell in love, not so much with the country, but with a person. And after that year was up, I ended up going back home, but coming back. And then I started my own business, which was a wholesale fashion accessory agency. And here I go fashion.
Yeah.
And so that allowed me then to go back to Paris, because I would mostly import from Paris, like French lines, and then sell them across Canada. So it allowed me traveling back to Europe and traveling in Canada. And it also shows you my entrepreneurial spirit, which is also deep in me, comes from wanting to direct my own life, my own destiny. And now, so I had that fashion agency called Vitamin Chic, which I still love as a name. Like, it's a good vitamin. It's a chic vitamin. And when I sold that, when I started having children, when my youngest one was a few years old, I have 3 children, I decided I needed something to go back to that was less seasonal, less ephemeral. And that's really when I made a conscious decision to learn about contemporary art and to wanting to have good art on my walls, but also really learn about. That was quite a conscious decision, I would say.
And, speaking of Canada, you launched the Vega Foundation in 2022 in Toronto. And I want to ask you more about that whole process. So firstly, this is kind of a meaty question, but firstly, from a practical standpoint, what does someone need to take into consideration when they want to launch a foundation? And then, what are the basic building blocks that you need to consider before you start?
It is a meaty question. I inherited capital that was set aside in a charitable foundation, and a percentage of that I had to donate to charities. And quickly, I felt I didn't enjoy that. That was more work to me than anything, because I wasn't close to any of these charities. So I really wanted to shift my philanthropy, being an entrepreneurial soul, to something self-directed, focused. And when somebody mentioned Art Foundation, I was immediately like, yes, that makes so much sense to me. And I started dabbling sort of into it, like first a bit more in Paris, because I live half the time in Paris now, and not realizing I needed more of a structure. And I spoke to my tax lawyer, and he offered to set up the structure with me. And I think that is one of the key things, is to have really good advice to set up the structure. And one of the key things we had to do in order to register as a art foundation in Canada was like to have a whole strategic plan. And I realized then that I needed help. And I was thinking to my list of friends and connections. I knew I wanted somebody in Canada too, very much. And I realized that when I started thinking, that there was this person, Giulia Paoli, who I known as a curator and as a director, and who I always was very fond of, that she could be the person. And I just singled her out to talk to her about the position. And she was so taken also by my vision, by my proposal. And she started off part-time in the beginning, but we started pretty quick then working together and working on this strategic plan in order to launch officially the foundation. And yeah, Giulia has been the director ever since. And I feel like I'm very lucky because we fill each other in perfectly. The vision and the personality of the foundation come from me, but Giulia has a huge experience in producing film and moving image. And so the two of us, and is a very organized person too, and the two of us just come together in a very organic way. And I pat myself on the back that it's so smooth, easy all the time to work together. Really,
yeah,
really
I think
nice.
Something like that is rare to find, and it's like gold dust when you find it. I think when you have a collaborator, I was speaking to a friend who's a gallerist, and it reminds me of what she said. She's been on the podcast as well. And she said, when you work with artists, it's also like a relationship. It's the same when you're looking for friendships, for romantic partners, for business partners, for all of these things. You need to have that sort of emotional and mental, like psychological synergy to where you can work together well. Because if not, you're doomed from the start. If you have to sort of force it to be able to work together, it's not going to work. is so important to go into business with someone who you feel you have that, who you gel with, basically. Yeah.
Because, yeah, in the arts, there is so much passion required. And if you don't have this feeling that where it sits right, then I don't think it works.
Yeah.
And yeah, we really look at things, we come at it from different angles, but we tend to agree quite organically. Like, it's a very great relationship. And now we just hired an assistant curator too, who already worked with us part-time. So again, like, it feels she grew organically into the foundation too. And so, yeah, like, it feels good.
So may I ask, for anyone curious to know more about the practical business structures of foundations like Vega, what is your governance and funding structure like? Like, do you have a board of, like, an advisory board? Do you have public funding? What's it like in Canada? I'm sort of really curious about that.
Yeah, that's for sure. We don't have public funding. And that's, I think, what we pride ourselves on, like Julia coming from public institutions. And we work with public institutions in Canada all the time because we don't have a space. So we work through the institutions to exhibit, to make the exhibitions happening with the artists that we have produced films with. But it feels like that is a strength, that we don't have to worry about funding. And we do have the small board of 3. We are 3 on the board, the governance structure. And we do have a small advisory of people in the arts.
So I want to ask you, why Toronto? Why Canada? I'd love to hear about how potentially these cultural policies, or like the art world in Canada, potentially impacted your decision as, a nonprofit organization.
We feel for sure Canada doesn't have a large amount of private art foundations yet. So, and institutions have less funding there also, as everywhere.
Every
else.
country. Absolutely.
And so our model is really to collaborate with the institutions. We don't want our own space. So
you don't want your own space in the future either.
No. We will never compete with them. We need them as much as they need us.
Yeah.
So that's why we have really good relations. It seems like they're always quite open when we propose a project to them. Like, we have actually, and also Canada has a history of supporting artist films to the National Film Board. So we have in that, and they still do that actually to this day. So we have that also to build upon. And as like Michael Snow, people like that were instrumental in bringing experimental film into the world at large. And we tend to work with the film festival, the Toronto Film Festival, with the segment that is called Wavelengths, which is named after Michael Snow's film Wavelength, which is the artist film. The curator of that program is Andrea Picard, and she's a good friend and an advisor with the foundation too. So we have often worked together with the festival too, which is also an institution, like a museum, like the Power Plant would be, or the National Gallery in Canada.
Well, so I'm hearing that there's such a strong ethos of collaboration.
Right.
And really bringing in what Vega is trying to do into the structures and organizations that exist in Canada.
Yeah, right.
And I guess for me, is it also because your life was based in Canada? Because I guess for me, when I speak to different people, what would you recommend going into the arts and et cetera, when I ask other arts professionals, or when, maybe younger professionals go and ask for advice, a lot of advice centers around being where the art is, being where the artists are. But a lot of people say, go to one of the big, art metropolises, like metropoli. What's that? Oh, goodness. What's the plural for metropolis? But these big art cities. There we go. And so it's like London, New York, Paris, maybe Basel, but that's kind of seasonal as well. And so I guess for me, hearing, and especially being able to speak to someone who is doing work in Toronto, I think is really special, because I wasn't necessarily aware of like a booming art scene in Toronto, but also you're telling me that Toronto is really a good central place for the type of art that Vega Foundation supports, which
Actually, Toronto, Canada. Like we've worked
Canada.
with the Vancouver Art Gallery, we've worked at Fogo Island, but it's growing fastly too. Cities like Toronto are growing so fast. So you feel there are real opportunities and interest in it too. And yeah, just a lot of young people also moving there. And at this moment, Canada is a very bright light in the scale of the world. Like I can't believe how many times people say here.
So I want to move on to talk about, the artistic focus of the Vega Foundation. But first, before we move on to that, I want to talk about your journey into art because it's been greatly influenced by your collection. And so I wanted to ask you, also because I'm nosy, can you speak on one or two pieces that you have that have particularly made an impact on how you approach your work in the arts today?
I love that question, and I'm probably going to veer off a little bit because once I start talking about my collection,
I love it. Go for it.
I'm quite passionate, but I love that you asked that question because I had never thought before about the link between my personal collection and the collection of Vega. And once I started thinking about that, I could see there is quite a few links. So in my personal collection, I have the stream of, I will just quickly summarize my personal collection. There's a stream of surrealism, and you see that in paintings of Carol Rama, Leonor Fini, but even Kirsten Bragg. There's a stream of post-surrealism, feminist position where the body is fragmented. I feel many works that fit in there, like many sculptural works, like Nairi Bagranian, Louise Bourgeois, Andra Ursutta, Isa Hensken. And then there is another extreme, which is post-human ruins, which I see Ave Pierre Huyghe aquarium that fits with that very much. And so when I then started thinking about people in Vega's collection, like Lucy Raven or Arya Dean, who fit very much with the sculptural work in my collection, or people like Lapsilam and Stephanie Comelang, who fit very much with the surrealist stream in my collection. So I love actually like that there is some connections, although it is ultimately very separate. And I started Vega. I mean, you're coming to that question, I think, but I started Vega also because I wanted to support something different than what I collect.
Exactly. But it's so much fun to hear about how you've kind of broken down your collection into 3 different streams that you're really passionate about. And I think it sounds like a wonderful collection. I love Leonor Fini, for example. I fell in love with surrealism, or I should say, I rediscovered my love for surrealism back in 2022 with Surrealism and Magic at the Peggy Guggenheim.
Oh, that show was so good. At the same time as the Venice Biennale of Cecilia Alamani, because her Biennale was about Leonora Carrington, was the title.
Yeah, The Milk of Dreams.
And there was so much surrealism. And the 2 exhibitions together.
You know that wasn't planned to coincide with one another because the Peggy Guggenheim collection plans their exhibitions like 7 years in advance or something crazy like that.
Oh.
So that was just fate because I spoke to Grzina Subalite, who's the curator there, and she told me, she was like, that actually was a very happy coincidence that was at the same time.
Right.
Like, how perfect. How perfect.
How perfect. Because, Leonor Fini was in Cecilia's exhibition, and then there was some beautiful ones in the Guggenheim exhibition too.
And Max Ernst and Carrington, and I mean...
And Leonora was in both too, Leonora Carrington.
Yeah.
Right?
Dorothea Tanning was
at
both.
Yeah.
And really those 3 sort of women who were pioneers in the surrealist movement, I just fell back in love with it. I really did. And obviously, I am also very passionate about like Peggy Guggenheim. I think, I read her biography before I went. And every time I'm in Venice, I go to the Peggy Guggenheim collection because I'm so in love with the location, with the programming. It's just a brilliant place to be. You can go and sit on that throne. Well, and that actually brings me to my next question, which is about the artistic focus of the Vega Foundation, because it is moving image practice. And you stated in an article for Art Basel that it's like a counterpart to your collecting. And that's something that you mentioned earlier on in the episode, because it's more experimental. And, despite your love for the moving image, you find it can be a challenging medium to collect, which, I think is very understandable. It's hard to display in a private space. So can you tell me more about your passion for the moving image and why it was important for you to launch a foundation with that focus?
Right. So, yeah, for sure. That was the main reason that idea came about, that I realized I had a few works in moving image and it was so hard to live with it in a home.
How did you display it in the beginning? Was it just like on a TV?
One was a plasma screen that leaned against the wall. It's a Philippe Areno and it's powered by a computer. And so a lot of things go wrong. It flashes at you. Like it's hard to sit in the room with a piece like that that's constantly flashes. Like it's okay in an exhibition space, but in a living space, it's very different. And I also realized that this was a medium, though, that, I was very much always interested in and felt connected to. And that, therefore, because was less collected and needed more support, was like less collectible. And so as a foundation, we don't just support with the production, we also support with the exhibition of the work. Back in Canada, mostly that is. And we support with the acquisition and we support also with the preservation. We have a whole part of that too, because that's also important for works, digital works. And in general, people that work in film, like an artist can say much more in a film and can be much more experimental, much more political. It tends to be younger artists working in that medium too often. So it feels also a medium that is younger people tend to gravitate to more. So on many levels, it feels very relevant and important, that support what we do. Yeah.
It reminds me of, because I studied history of art at UCL, and there was like a part of the pathway during my university degree. It was with Hannah Hölling, who's no longer at UCL, but she was really specializing in sort of the conservation and materiality of digital works of art. And, there were conversations surrounding it that were so interesting, because it's like, oh, I didn't even take into consideration that this piece of technology will be so out of date that if something happens to it, we cannot find a replacement for it. And it's only 40 years old potentially. But because of how fast technology moves, we have to be in the arts really, really diligent about the conservation process of these technological works of art. It's kind of a completely different ballgame to the conservation of paintings, frescoes, drawings. It's quite a different scenario.
It's a total different scenario of preservation.
Yeah.
But that's interesting. You learned about that. That was part of that's great. Yeah.
It was. And we could take a specific course on like material studies, which I didn't do personally, but we had like a couple of courses that related to that. But you could actually take like a very specific, things will change and adapt, and how you have to be active.
We decided to use the term moving image because we thought we're not just doing film, we're not just doing video. We worked on a hologram with Dominique Gonzalez, Fuster ones. It can be, we have a piece that was made for Instagram by Mariam Benani, the two lizards that went viral during the COVID epidemic. And we felt moving image was therefore like a good term, all encompassing also for new technologies that we don't sort of know yet, or that are just in their infant.
That's what we're working with.
So we felt moving image was a good term to use to encompass all the different aspects of digital and analog art too. Like we were talking to Citadine, of course, who's like the analog artist. So, and we have other analog works. Like I love personally also analog
It's also collect.
Yeah, of course, of course.
Briefly, but before I dive into my penultimate question, that's where working with new ink is probably really amazing with Salome. Yeah.
Salome is amazing. You know her?
I do.
Okay.
Yes.
She is amazing.
She is. She really is. I think that
Have you had her on the podcast?
I have interviewed her, but not for the podcast. It's namely for a book that I've written, because she's in the book that I've written called Working in Art, where each chapter is a different art career that you can go after within the art. So obviously there's working in museums, which is the episode that Salome's in. There's also working in curating, which is in, what did I just say episode? The chapter that Salome is in.
Yeah, right.
Working in curating, which is the chapter that Georgina Subalite from the Peggy Guggenheim collection is in. And then I also have plenty of different sort of career options or career paths within the book, including being an art lawyer, being an art advisor, being a technician, an art writer, an art content creator, which is something that's quite new, working in galleries. So it covers really a plethora of different art world jobs, and it's then supplemented by interviews that I've conducted specifically for the book. And Salome agreed to sit down with me. So I met her for that. And yeah, she's in the book.
Nice.
Yeah.
So the book will have a photo?
Probably not. It's just going to be text.
And who's the publisher?
Octopus, which is an imprint of Hachette.
Okay. Nice.
Yeah. It's exciting.
It sounds amazing.
I'll send you a copy.
Yeah. And they really an inside look at the art world, right? Because the art world is still quite opaque.
Yeah.
I think this one in many ways, and there's still a lot to decipher or like to bring to the forefront.
I think it might bust it wide open a little bit.
Right. And not in a gossipy way, because I don't like those gossipy books.
No, it's not that at all. It's very much like what it means to work in the arts. It's very much about people who go after their careers, and it's written for people who want to have a career in it. Because I think that the government, especially in the UK, I think less than 8 state schools in the UK have a history of art at A level. Like, it is astonishing at how little the arts is actually encouraged early on in life. And so I really hope that maybe some high school students, people who are doing their GCSEs, A levels, thinking about uni, they can look at the book and think, oh, I really love art. What can I do? And it's a very positive book. It's a very uplifting book about people who are going after their careers. I have people in the book like stalwart arts professionals, like Lisa Dennison from Sotheby's, Thaddeus Ropack from Thaddeus Ropack Gallery, Philip Hoffman from the Fine Art Group. And then I have people like Salome and like younger people who are starting out as well. So I have this mixture of people who talk about it from this level of like, I've been in it for 30 years or 50 years in some cases. And then I have some people who are like, I'm starting out, I'm in year 5. This is my relevant advice that I can give for people. And so bringing it back, this is my penultimate question for you. In the last 3 years, because, we're talking about technological innovation, because we're talking about pivoting and changing and thinking about new ways of approaching work, I want to ask you, how has the Vega Foundation developed and changed, since its inception in 2022? And also, while we're looking forward, I want to ask you, what do you envision for the next 5 years of the foundation?
I feel like what we have built up and we are very fond of is our relationships with Canadian institutions. And there is one very special relationship with the Power Plant Art Gallery in Toronto. We were just opening in November a 4th exhibition with them by Lucy. And we're already planning another project for next year with them too. Like, it's a beautiful collaboration that now we've really started celebrating and sort of cementing in words. Like, we sort of really writing that, promoting that, writing that out. And so to build more on that. And I feel like in general, like, because I discussed this with Julia too, we feel we are pretty well where we like to be, like at this moment. Like, we don't need to grow by leaps and bounds, but we feel very proud of what we have accomplished. And we just want to keep doing the same focused quality work support that we are doing. one dream I have, which I feel is something that we can work on for sure, is to do a festival of moving image in Canada, probably in Toronto or Montreal, and to have experts come and talk and bring our collection of moving image together with newer works. And it'd be so fun to program a film festival of moving image like that. So that is something that I would like to do.
Podcast collaboration with the Vega Foundation 2.0. I'll head on over.
And the other thing too that I want to say is very much, I know that the foundation is set up, I hope, to outlive me, that it will definitely stay on. And also that the collection of the foundation is not at all linked to me. It's very much a collection that we like to donate to an institution eventually. And even if we do that already, sooner than later, like as we start collecting more, that the institution already knows it's coming towards them. Like, so I want to stress that it's not about, for me, this collection or whatever. Like, it's very much a public collection, and it's very much a foundation that I see living onwards past me. Yeah.
Past you. Yeah.
I'm not that old yet, but
yeah, you're not. There's some years yet. Indeed. But I can understand but you're saying that you want this. This is a legacy. This isn't,
right.
This isn't, about any, you're leaving ego at the door in that sense.
It's not a vanity project.
It's not a vanity project. Elisa, I want to ask you my final question of the episode, which is a fun one just to round off our chat. And it's one that I ask all of my guests. If you could pick one artist from art history to have dinner with, who would it be and why?
It would be, I thought about it, and I thought Leonor Fini would be really fun. Like, I would love to talk to her about her life, like her life in Paris, living with two husbands, like one above her, one underneath her, and 23 cats. And
she had 23 cats?
She had 23 cats. And she had two lovers' husbands all her life. And she supported both of them. And her dealer in Paris is still the same dealer that worked with Leonor all through her life. So it's like she lived this life. Like, she was relatively famous, but she could have been more famous had she gone off to more dealers or more, like, be more out there. But then she was also part of, like, the film world and the theater. Like, she did the costumes for a Fellini film. She was always dressing up herself in masks and costumes a very interesting personality. I think somebody should do a film about her. I think she would be really good material for a film.
Like a documentary.
Yeah.
Well, maybe at this fantasy dinner party, she can bring some costumes and vests to wear while you have dinner. Oh, well, Elisa, thank you so much for coming on All About Art, for telling me more about the Vega Foundation. And that is it for today on All About Art. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave me a rating or a review, as it helps more people discover the show. Also, feel free to share with your friends, or if you share on social media, tag me and get in touch. Thank you so much for listening.